Well, our top story, there has been a large explosion on a cargo ship near Crimea in which at least 10 sailors have died. The incident took place in the Kerch Strait in the Black Sea. The blaze reportedly spread following an explosion as a gas tanker was refueling another ship. Now, the Russian Transport Ministry said that some crew members of the two ships jumped into the sea to escape the blaze. The ships, Candy and Maestro, were from Tanzania and had 31 crew members combined. There were 16 Turkish citizens and 15 Indians. And authorities are still trying to find the 7 missing crew members. The Federal Agency for the Sea and River Transport said that the blaze has erupted while fuel was being pumped from one vessel to another. According to reports, there were also stormy conditions in the sea when the incident occurred. The ships were sailing in neutral waters in the Black Sea when the accident happened. Reports claim that there was no distress signal sent from the captain of the two ships. And the Indian Embassy in Russia has reacted to the media reports on the incident, and the embassy has said, and I quote here, our embassy in Moscow is in constant touch with the concerned Russian agencies to get more information on Indian nationals affected in the incident and to extend necessary assistance as well. And Julia Chapman, my colleague, is joining us now from Moscow for the very latest on this. Julia, what more do we know from authorities about this rescue mission now?
Well, we understand that authorities no longer believe that they are likely to find any survivors of this incident between these two cargo ships, which, as you say, were carrying out a fuel transfer from one ship to the other. They're now looking for bodies of the remaining people, and we understand that the number of people killed, the number of bodies they've found is now 14 people. So there's still a number of people that they're looking for after this tragic incident, but they say that it's unlikely that any more survivors will be found, and they say that they are trying to tackle this blaze, but they are having to let it burn because the conditions are so tenuous down there in the Black Sea that it's difficult and dangerous to proceed with any more emergency services there during that incident. So they're now trying to treat those survivors of the incident who have been saved, have been rescued, but the hopes for any further survivors are dimming.
Right, Julia, thanks very much indeed for joining us with the latest there. So the hopes of any more survivors, they are dimming. Julia, thanks very much indeed for that. Well, in other news now, Pakistani forces have killed Indian fishermen near the Mitha port in Gujarat. Now, a boat carrying 7 fishermen drowned after firing by Pakistan's Maritime Security Agency. 6 fishermen were rescued by the Indian Coast Guard, but 1 fisherman could not survive. This incident occurred on January 17th. It seems India has raised the issue and sent a note for bail to Pakistan as well. Now, well, as world leaders gather in Davos for the World Economic Forum, the world economy is staring, well, at an uncertain future with Brexit and the US-China trade war, major economies slowing down and protectionism setting in Europe. The International Monetary Fund has come out with a grim warning already, even as the World Economic Forum meeting is underway now in Davos. So what's really happening? So IMF has actually warned that the risk of a sharper slowdown in global growth is imminent, cutting the world economic growth forecast to 3.5% in 2019 and 3.6% for 2020. This is its second downgrade in 3 months. Speaking ahead of the World Economic Forum Summit, IMF Managing Director Christine Lagarde urged policymakers to address economic vulnerabilities.
The bottom line is that after 2 years of solid expansion, the world economy is growing more slowly than expected, and risks are rising. But even as the economy continues to move ahead, as I said, it is facing significantly higher risks, some of them actually related to policy. And these risks are increasingly intertwined
And China's economy will expand at its lowest rate at 6.6% in 28 years. Although it has told leaders in Davos that there is nothing to worry about, the IMF has attributed this to pressure from the US tariffs, warning that this could trigger a huge sell-off in the financial markets and put immense pressure on the emerging markets, as would the case of Brexit.
A no-deal Brexit is one of the major risks to our forecast. Our forecast incorporate a smooth transition, that a deal is actually made, and that there is a smooth transition to the new setup. But if there is a disruptive exit, or if there is continued uncertainty for many more months, both of those are going to weigh negatively on growth going forward. And I think it is imperative for the leaders to resolve this uncertainty immediately.
And even as the world continues to slow down, the IMF has said that India's economy will pick up pace this year. India's GDP is forecasted to expand 7.5% in the financial year 2020 and 7.7% in the next year. The downgrade in global growth forecast comes, however, at a time when the summit is already facing setbacks. Top global leaders like the US President Donald Trump, the British Prime Minister Theresa May are not attending the event. And the Russian President Vladimir Putin, the French President Emmanuel Macron and the Indian Prime Minister are also going to be absent. China will be only represented by its Vice President. And well, WION's correspondent Sumit Chaturvedi is in Davos and caught up with the former governor of the Reserve Bank of India, Raghuram Rajan. In an exclusive conversation, he spoke about the IMF report, cutting growth forecasts for the year 2019 and 2020. Let's listen in.
How's been the World Economic Forum so far for you, sir?
I think it's just started, so not much has happened so far. We'll, see what people say, what people think. It's a process of discussion and debate.
And sir, global economy, it looks like there's some dark clouds over there. Yesterday's IMF report also said. What's your assessment over there?
Well, I have no reason to differ from the IMF. There's broadly strength in the underlying economy, but there are some clouds. Certainly China's underperforming relative to the past, and in the US there are issues like the government shutdown, so we have to wait and see.
And well, WION Sumit Chaturvedi also spoke to the CEO of the Indian IT company Wipro, who has contradicted the IMF report, saying numbers don't show economic slowdown. Let's listen into what he had to say.
The first thing about the World Economic Forum, what's your response to that, sir?
I think, like every year, there are very relevant topics that are being discussed. It's just warming up. Today is the first day. I think globalization 4.0 is very relevant. It gives a good forum to openly discuss some of the things in closed room sessions. So I'm liking it here.
There are dark clouds of maybe slowdown hovering over the global economy. What is your plan? Because many of the clients are definitely, will be impacted by that.
So, I'm an optimist. We don't see impact right now. I just worry that we should not talk ourselves into a slowdown or a recession. If you look at the financial numbers, none of them right now are indicating to a slowdown. Rather, last year the world economy has grown at one of the fastest paces. The US economy has done very well. The Indian economy has done well. Most of the top economies, continental Europe, Japan has started growing up at a relatively faster pace of a very long time. So I am an optimist. We'll always be watchful and we should be prepared for the worst. But right now I don't see dark clouds as such.
One last question on the Indian IT sector. What's your outlook for this current financial year?
I think the Indian IT sector has always been able to navigate any of the transformations, and I think as a sector we are doing quite well navigating the digital transformation. Wipro itself has been named as the top 5 digital brands, and it's now within the top 10 global IT services brands. So I think we are doing well, and I think the entire industry is poised for undergoing this transformation very well.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving it.
Thank you.
All right, and Sumit is now live with us from Davos for the very latest on this. And Sumit, thanks for talking to us this evening. Well, we've heard what the experts have to say about the IMF cutting growth estimates, but what else is happening in Davos? Now, this is, of course, happening at a time when there is such a churn in the world economy and Brexit is happening, that trade war between the US and China. So a lot of churn and then Davos happening in the middle of that.
Well, Bhairavi, this is my third World Economic Forum, and I can tell you that crises have never been so much in the world and the attendance thin as compared to the earlier years. But yes, there are crises looming large over the world economies. Politics is there. Well, the WEF Davos is meant to bring together politicians and businessmen to solve the problems. But it looks like the discussions will start today. Overall, if we talk about the World Economic Forum this time, there's a wave of pessimism because CEOs across the world are concerned about issues like global trade wars, also issues like the growing tensions between many nations, including the economic problems in Venezuela and Colombia. So these issues are there. There's dark clouds of these problems over the world economy. At the same time, Indian CEOs are quite optimistic because India is having a very positive momentum. It's a bright spot. It's in bright spot when compared to other parts of the world. So Indian CEOs are quite optimistic about their overall economy growth. The only concern they have here is the election year because they want to know who's going to come next so that they can plan their investments better. But overall, it's been a mixed response. Today is the first day. And going forward, we will be able to speak to executives, both global and Indians, and will know better the sense of economy and what they think about economy as a whole.
Right, and Sumit, to talk a little bit about today. Now, there are some top speakers who will be addressing Davos today, but also, as you're pointing out, many major absentees now, including we're hearing now that Saudi Arabia will also not, the Crown Prince will also not be there. So in the context of so many major absentees from the US, from Theresa May to the Indian Prime Minister, what can Davos really achieve when it comes to the crisis in the world economy?
Well, that's true that the many world leaders are absent here. At the same time, it gives an opportunity to the people who are left here, the people earlier, well, what we are hearing from many CEOs and global leaders, that earlier these leaders used to take limelight, people used to hear to them. But now the voices of other countries would also be heard. That's also an important thing because inclusive overall global growth is the motto of WEF here, and they have to now ensure that inclusive growth happens. Now the small countries would be heard. Well, talking about India, Indian contingent is not here in very big number, but other countries are here. Ethiopia, African, other countries, Chad and other small countries, they are quite hopeful. Now their voices will be heard. Otherwise, these big leaders, Macron, Theresa May or Trump, they steal the limelight. This time, the other leaders can also present their views, which will be heard across the discussion rooms in Congress area as far as Davos is concerned. What we are not missing this time here is the snow. The snow is there, which was there earlier. Also, it's more colder than last time. So the snow-peaked resort of Davos is actually in its full glory. And you can see behind me the crowds are here. The overall markets are buzzing. The overall buzz is still as there, except the absence of these four top leaders.
All right, Sumit, thanks very much for that. And you will take care of yourself. Don't get a cold there. Thanks for that. Well, it's nearly a month into the partial US shutdown now, and the clamor is growing to bring an end to it. Federal workers in Chicago held a protest hoping to get back to work as soon as possible. In downtown Chicago, dozens out of the 30,000 federal workers who have been let off work took to the streets chanting, "End the shutdown now." The shutdown has affected a quarter of the federal government, and some 800,000 of employees are yet to get their salary. Caught in the crossfire are the people on the other side of the border wanting to get into the US, and they are not happy with the US president's persistent hostility towards them. Activists at the migrant shelters in Mexico's Tijuana border lamented the US president's obsession with the border wall and his harsh view that migrants are the reason for drug trafficking and violence in America.
De lo que él quiere construir el muro. Pero antes de que él construya el muro, él tiene que ver la situación y los problemas que traen nosotros los inmigrantes hacia Estados Unidos. El primero tiene que ver la necesidad que uno trae. Si uno quiere entrar a Estados Unidos no es que porque uno quiere deleitir, ni que porque quiere hacer un daño a su país. No, es un país maravilloso para poder trabajar y sacar adelante a nuestra familia.
But Trump has maintained his stand. He tweeted, and I quote, "Democrats are kidding themselves. They don't really believe it. If they say you can stop crime, drugs, human trafficking and caravans without a wall or steel barrier, stop playing games and give America the security it deserves."